Good evening. Welcome to Brotherly Love, a conversation on race, reentry, and redemptive justice. My name is Ivan Henderson. I'm Vice President of Programming at the African American Museum. And on behalf of our board, our staff, all of our volunteers, all of our members, and all of our supporters and partners, we thank you for joining us this evening for this important and hopefully impactful conversation. This is a very difficult time for everyone, obviously for museums and for those in the arts, but for everyone in the world in a number of different ways. Very early in 2020, that was brought home to me through some personal experiences and things I witnessed personally, but also convinced me of the importance of the occasional obvious impact of museum work. We get to have meaningful conversations around art, history, and culture. And in the case of the African American Museum in Philadelphia, those of Black people for the past 400 years in this country, but also far beyond that and far ahead. And so while this is a difficult time, we want to put our collective voice together and send our prayers and thoughts out to all. And say that we hope we can have a role in healing our communities and moving forward. I want to ask folks to support the African American Museum in Philadelphia and arts institutions in general, and those engaged in work improving the lives of other humans. Our mission is to illuminate and preserve Black art, history, and culture. We believe that we play a role in facilitating conversation, critical thinking, and ultimately healing. So we invite you, while we're still close to the public, to visit our virtual campus at www.ampmuseum.org to access a recording of this event or to find out about upcoming programs. But please support our institution with your thoughts, your advocacy, your words, and obviously your money and your time, as well as all the institutions represented tonight. One of the things that sustains our institution is partnership. So through partnership, we were able to launch just a couple of weeks ago virtually an exhibition titled Rendering Justice. Rendering Justice is an unflinching look at artwork produced by justice impacted and justice involved artists, with us having an opportunity to look at the effects of mass incarceration on individuals and communities. So this exhibition features 9 artists and really puts them in the driver's seat in terms of having agency and sharing the portions of their narrative they want to share, and helping us see the whole person beyond maybe the incarceration that's part of their history. We put up Rendering Justice in close partnership with Mural Arts Philadelphia, and this exhibition and project is supported by the Art for Justice Fund. So Jesse Crimes, the guest curator who came to us with Rendering Justice and Mural Arts, worked with our Director of Curatorial Services, Dejay Duckett, to bring these objects and all of these works of art and ideas into our building and also to adorn the exterior of the building. Once that opening occurs and the exhibition opens, then the interpretation begins. And so tonight is a step in that direction. We worked on Rendering Justice before this year, and we were supposed to originally open it in June. And then we had to push the date back several times. But we've been working on this since sometime last year. So I was surprised and delighted this January, which seems a long time ago, January of 2020, when I had an opportunity to see a rich intersection between my personal life and my work in the museum to date. And I've had some pretty rich intersections. I'm nervous, but I hope that what we're doing today can be an example of how individuals and families heal and evolve, and what lessons we might take to our broader communities. This story is not mine alone, and it is in progress and in process, which perhaps makes it even more important to share right now. So today you'll hear from me, Ivan Henderson. You'll meet Andre Henderson, a recent graduate of Olympic College with an AA in Human Services, and a certification as a substance use dependency professional. He's also an all-around good dude and my big brother, attending University of Washington, and making moves in his life, which we'll talk about. Also, Cheryl Nuñez, Vice President for Equity and Inclusion, will be our moderator this evening at Olympic College. She also serves as the college's Title IX coordinator, overseeing efforts to prevent and address sexual misconduct, including gender-based violence and stalking. I can also say this is my Harvard English and American literature sister, that I'm a Harvard English grad and she's a Harvard English grad too. And one of the many alignments that we've enjoyed. I want to give respect and love before I get started, before I go any further, to my mother and sister. We're here with Cheryl, and Andre and I are here to talk about brotherly love. But Renee Henderson and Sonia Henderson are central to this story as well. They complete the nuclear family of my youth. Mama is the common source of our strength. No joke. She's the reason I've always known that I could not only rebound after a failure, but I could come back stronger and better if I so choose. And Sonia, who many folks here would know, is the bridge between us, me and Andre. She's the advisor to both of us, and one of the true keepers of our family culture, as you will see when our children are around her. And so this journey began earlier this year when Sonia and I hopped in a car and drove a couple of hours and a couple states away to witness an awards event. We were going to hear a speaker on the occasion of receiving an award for his achievements, talk about where he's been, talk about his goals and the obstacles he's overcome. When we walked into the auditorium, packed house, to hear this person speak, his voice wasn't booming. It was loud enough to be effective, and it was crystal clear. He used the rise and fall of his volume and the emotion to drive home his message, and he metered it out. And I realized I was witnessing just what I had driven a couple of hours for, was to be inspired and to celebrate someone's achievement. And so what I walked into that auditorium heard was something like this.
I'm from Midwestern United States. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, a city on the Mississippi River, historically known as the gateway to the West. I am from summertime, which was my favorite season in those days. I am from the luminescent glow of fireflies as children give chase to capture their magic. I am from the deafening sound of thousands of cicadas flicking their wings as the males sing their timbrel songs. I am from humidity that clings to me and glistens on my dark skin on a hot and windless night. I am from light and darkness. I am from city streets littered with broken glass and shattered dreams. I am from neighborhoods lined with vacant lots and empty buildings. I am from gunshots that ring out in the middle of the day and the middle of the night. The sad thing about it is you get used to it. I am from the American ghetto. It really doesn't matter which one. They are all built, shaped, and divided by violence and oppression. They are all marked by historical trauma and the destruction of community and culture. I am from darkness and light. I am from mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother who had been given the burden and blessing of raising our families and our communities. I am from the lessons of their hopes and their fears. I am from sweet potatoes, collard greens, fried chicken, and peach cobbler, soul food. I am from the tunes of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, and Aretha Franklin, to name a few, soul music. I am from family get-togethers in the park and playing childhood games with my little sister and brother, and lots of cousins. We may not have had much, but we were all we had, and that was enough. I am from togetherness, soul healing. I am from searching for my father, who was not in my life, and hoping that I can learn to be a man all on my own. I am from finding my father, only in repeating his same mistakes with my own children. I was never able to be close to my father, but I now know some of what he must have went through. I am from intergenerational cycles of struggle and poverty. I am from drug addiction to recovery. I am from incarceration to higher education. I am from light that has always guided me. I am also from darkness within. I am from pain that I've caused as well as endured. I am from better days are coming in. I am from helplessness and brokenness, a place where I had submitted to defeat. It is from this helplessness and brokenness that I prayed and was lifted to my feet. I am from this time I'll do it differently. I'm from I'll never hurt you again. I am from a determination to help my children. I am from forgiveness. I am from change. I am a man.
That's powerful stuff. And so I had driven down to Annapolis, Maryland with Sonia to hear my brother, Andre Henderson, who I know and with whom I've had great contact, especially with increased frequency in the past couple of years. But there was this alignment between where he was and what he was there for and all the things that he was talking about and the work that I knew we were doing to bring rendering justice to life on our walls, at our museum, and also the broader conversations that we could have around criminal justice, around the effects on individuals and families and broader communities, but also get a look in. I've seen this year, not only in the news, you know, a number of conversations around how those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated are affected at a time like this during a pandemic and during times of immense social unrest. I've also seen and heard too many occasions where when a Black life is lost or a Black life is endangered or a Black body is mortally wounded, how that person can be vilified if they have any sort of rap sheet or any sort of record. And sometimes the vilification begins as they lay dying, and we're not even sure if they'll make it or not. And yet I know whole people and whole truths, and I've witnessed so much in my personal life with my brother, but also in preparing for and learning about the artists whose works are on display in Rendering Justice. And so I knew this conversation had to happen. And so thank you, Andre, for sharing. And I'll turn it over to Cheryl to get us rolling.
I just want to first thank you all for letting me be a witness to this amazing story. I've had the opportunity to talk with Andre quite a bit, and always centered in his conversation is his family. And so I see in this conversation between the two of you really lessons for everyone, something universal. I see that your journeys have sometimes diverged, but they've always led you back to the very same place, to the place you're supposed to be. And I was just hoping you could really take us back and reflect on the memories that you both have of this brotherly love, and give us a sense of just how you have been shaped by your respective and collective stories.
We've talked and you know, I was looking back over our lives together and a bunch of memories. And I wanted to go back to the beginning of this year and we'll march backwards from there. So early 2020, walking into that auditorium and seeing you speak, you know, I saw Man on Fire. I saw you fully inhabiting Andre, all of your intelligence and power and everything that, you know, I'm sure Mama would have been telling you since you were born, and everything anybody hopes for, you know, from people they look up to. So I was completely blown away, let alone the 3-hour lunch where you took me and Sonia out and preached to us and did things that you've never done. It reminded me of you know, the song Mom used to play every morning, the Stevie Wonder's version of If I Ruled the World, where he says, you know, every man would hold his head up high and there would be sunshine. And I knew she was talking about her sons and her fathers. And so early 2020, I mean, her sons and her and their fathers. So early 2020, I saw that in you. Like I saw a man holding his head up high in the way my mother had wished for all that time ago. But where were you early this year, on your trajectory?
I'll go back, to the same time in 2017, earlier this year. I had been selected as a Achieving the Dream Scholar for 2020, one of 8 students out of over 200 community colleges in the country. And so I was there, as a culmination of my academic success. I was there to use my story to try to be effective in creating change and transformation for other formerly incarcerated students and for all students, really. I was there to represent my college. I was there to just, take the next step in healing. But after, all of those reasons why I was there and why I went there, after having a conversation with you and Sonia, and the places that we went to in that conversation that we referred to as going to the mountaintop, it felt like all of those other reasons really just kind of faded away. It felt like I was there for us to have that conversation. And I was there for my children to hopefully have, um, be able to witness it. I was there for my mother. I was there um, returning home. And that's where that conversation really took me. And that was, you know, not just the foundation, but also the icing on the cake for me. And it really, truly made that experience for me transformational and really boosted me up to the next rung on the ladder so I could be able to reach even higher.
Folks with whom I work and folks who I know who, they hear about you, they know about you, but, I came back blown away, literally, floored. Sonia and I, the whole drive back, just to see you and hear you in a way that we hadn't. I mean, I was anxious to carry your bags and open your doors. I really was blown away. But let's go back a little further. A couple years before, another timestamp, 2017 or so. At that time, I was in a different place. I was in some darkness due to my personal journey, dealing with a divorce, and just dealing with next steps and a bunch of other things. Not necessarily sharing that with you or with everyone, but going through my thing and trying to handle it and keep it to self. Where were you? What were you? What were you up to around that same time a couple years ago?
So in 2017 is when I had started Olympic College. Started my journey in a community college. Started getting back on my feet, and really began this transformational journey. And I think it's really kind of effective for me when we talk like this about where you were, where I was, and then where we were together. Because I feel like in 2017, when you were going through what you were going through, I was on my way back. I was on my way back home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had left so many years earlier, and I had known that we needed each other throughout our lives and the things we had been going through. Even if sometimes we hadn't reached out to each other, but I knew that I was on my way back, and so I found some things at community college that had been waiting for me, and some tools that would help me complete my journey. I found community. I understood what that meant for the first time. I started to hone leadership skills, build some community relationships, and take part in community activism.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most important things I found in community college was a knowledge of who I really am and what I could do. I never had believed in myself to that extent before, and I call that time of my life awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gained the tools to awaken to critical consciousness and began to ask questions about social injustices that are pervasive in our society. Um, and I began to understand for the first time what had happened to me. You know, while I take full responsibility of the choices I've made, and especially pain that I've caused my family and myself and others, I now understand the limitation of the choices that were in front of me. Um, and I have an analysis of my social location and um, the agency that I have to make things change.
Well, that's amazing. I think that's one of those time periods where, in order to maintain, the facade, or not to maybe not reveal the crack in the portrait of my life, I didn't reach out. And perhaps could have witnessed something in what you were going through at that moment. And you probably would have had some wisdom for me. And so, there are times where we have stayed away from each other, and I don't think it serves us. There are ways that we strengthen each other, and perspective that we offer on one another's lives, that I do think could help shepherd us through some of these situations. At the same time, like that foundation with Mama, part of it, part of my relationship with you for a long time has been in my mind. It's been based on memories, and it's been based on, things that are inside that don't leave when a person is in another state. So let's go back a little further. I'll go for a block of years, 2012 through 16, and maybe that led to 17, but was there anything else between 12 and 16 in that journey that you care to talk about?
Well, 2012 to 2016 are very important to me in this timestamp of our life experience, because that was the time of my deliverance. That was the time when, things really started to change for me. And at first, not for the better. It was, I had split with my ex-wife again. 2012, I went to full-time homelessness and drug addiction. I had abandoned all communications with most of my family, which I was just too ashamed to face. And that cost me a lot of which I'm still paying for today. I got my first felony in 2012, which was a drug possession that would be followed by many more felony convictions over the next few years and other drug-related crimes, as well as multiple incarcerations. So during this time period, I was hitting my rock bottom of a long downward spiral. And it was at this murky bottom of existing sort of beyond death, because I found out that there are worse things than death. It's here where I found God, and He saw fit to bring me back. And that's something I never want to forget, and I often reflect over those years. Also, during that time, something that rang loudly to me in my experience had been family connection, resilience of culture, even a lot of, some of your rhymes and raps that you had written in the past and songs you had made.
Mm-hmm.
I used to carry that with me, and I truly believe that it was those type of things that helped carry me out, that I would not have made it if it wasn't for those memories and those experiences. So at the end of all of that in 2016, I went to drug treatment for the first and only time after 25 years of hardcore drug abuse. I went to treatment for my first time. My clean date is July 6, 2016, and I've been clean and sober since then. So I look at that time as the time before my awakening. That was my, my deliverance. That was my redemption. It was my exodus.
That time period is interesting for me as well, because I think, I was floating along. I think I left the African American Museum in Philadelphia and went and worked elsewhere at the University of Delaware for those exact 4 years. And I think I was seeking something, seeking confidence in my knowledge and mastery of my craft, and not that, still seeking that, but I was looking for tools and just other experiences, but ultimately I learned a lot and picked up some wonderful lessons and colleagues. I think lessons about the job, but also about working in an institution that wasn't predominantly Black and whose mission wasn't around protecting, preserving righteous Black space. I realized right away that my life to that point, despite the institutions I've gone to for school, every job I've ever had, every internship, and everything I've ever done for fun was around building Black community in one way and enjoying the fruits of what we built. And so during those years, I was falling back a little bit, but also reorienting myself to try to come back to a place like the African American Museum in Philadelphia and feel like I brought something back with me and equipped to make a difference. But it was a huge transition and something that I did with great uncertainty. And once again, I know that there were missed conversations between us during that time period. But I also think we had to go through those time periods to get here. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't trade all of it. I would make it a little easier, but I wouldn't trade all of it. So let's dip back a little further because you mentioned the rhymes and a couple of other things. So let's go late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. The time period when I was first going away to boarding school, got, through a better chance, scholarship student off to the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut, far from home in St. Louis, and began my little striver, quote unquote, narrative, experiencing a physical and somewhat of a mental distance from home and that core family that we had grown up with, but also still finding out how to maintain those connections, having experienced your departure from home just a couple of years before that. But I also remember feeling, like I was set up. When you left in the late 80s, early 90s, you left me rap. You gave that to me years before you left, but you left me hip hop, that culture, that wordsmithing. I actually found a bunch of your notebooks, things, some of your rap notebooks, but also notebooks on as personal essays that you had written. I think completing your high school degree or getting a diploma or something. But things that reflected on me, yourself, and us. You left me the Clippers. Anybody who went to high school or college with me knows that, the $5 fade was in full effect. It's a skill. And in our neighborhood and where I was from, you left us your legend. You left me the Clippers, you left me hip hop, and you left me a way to navigate. And I take all those things, quite seriously to this day. But those things were social lubricant. There was capital. Those were things that made it so I didn't have to deal with other things. I was in a vaunted position as a barber. I didn't get into fights. I was in a vaunted position as a rapper. I was creative. People didn't have beef with me. I didn't do those things. And so that's what I remember back in 89, 90, 91. But I know you were going to the military at the time or partially enlisted still. So what were those years like for you?
Well, first of all, I'm just very grateful that I was able to be a part of your life long after that much of a part of your life in a very, near presence, even though I was gone so far away. I just remember, I left home for the military, almost 19 years of age. And at the time, I hadn't realized how far from home my journey would really take me. I was really running away in some respects, not understanding who I was, my self-identity, or my place in the world. And some parts of me, I just didn't want to be a burden or a drain on my family. and I knew I had to do something with my life. And also attempting to escape some of the negative outcomes for so many other young Black males in our communities. Um, so at the time when I left home, I don't think I could really appreciate enough what I meant to my mom and to you and to Sonia, to our mom, and what we meant to each other. But now sometimes that I look back, I try to imagine what my leaving looked like to you and to Sonia, especially being so young.
At the time, 89, 90, at that point in my life, I was being filled with ideas. Um, one of my high school advisors, we're 7 years apart. I'm 7 years younger than Andre. So I was being filled up at that time. I was 12 years old, perhaps when you left. Public Enemy, Classical Junior Academy, A Different World. I had all of these images and ideas where I was armored with Blackness and had a great appreciation. I didn't feel pretty, but I felt beautiful. And I felt it at that age. I do not sense in talking to you that you had that awareness at the same time I did, or or earlier in your life. And so I want to ask you about that. Like, what are some of those differences and influences that I perhaps took for granted, that we've kind of talked about over the years that maybe you didn't have or were not aware of?
I thought about that a lot too. I was always very proud of you. Your accomplishments. I was unaware of a lot of negative things that you had went through. Because you were achieving so much. You were growing. You had that sense of who you were and what you could accomplish. Um, and we've had conversations before, and I think one of the conversations that you, Cheryl, and I had together was about, what kind of informed the two different trajectories
Right.
in our lives. Us coming from the same mom, same household, the same set of circumstances. I went through drug addiction, incarceration, and a lot of those kind of negative impacts. And you went on to achieve in higher education. And I think some of the things that you told me about that I hadn't known about before were the presence of certain relationships or encounters in your life with people who had hit the right switches or pushed the right buttons at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke to me about, I think one of your teachers from boarding school who really set you up for success and nurtured you in that respect. And you told me about one of the relationships that you had with a close friend in the neighborhood who was into the African American experience
Mm-hmm.
and kind of taught you what it meant to be Black. And I don't know, we just had some experiences. You had some experiences that I didn't necessarily experience for whatever reasons.
Mm-hmm.
That later on in my life, when I did have a mentor, or I did return to higher education, or I was given an opportunity to awaken to a critical consciousness, that things kind of changed for me, and then I became aware, and so I think the mentors, having a mentor, having
Mm-hmm.
those positive role relationships, and having um, the opportunities in education are some of the things that kind of sets those trajectories apart.
One of the reasons we're sitting here today is the conversation with you and Cheryl, where we decided these things can't happen by chance. Mama scoured the earth for things that were free and affordable, that kept us out of trouble, where she knew where we would be fed, and we would learn something. I benefited as the youngest of three from all the things you and Sonia had tried and Mama had tried with you, and maybe seen could work and didn't work. So I'll quickly say I went to Hotchkiss and applied through a Better Chance. Sonia had looked at those applications a couple years before. Without us being aware of those things, maybe I would not have, I know I wouldn't have applied, but because it was already a part of my backdrop, I expected that I would apply 3 years after my sister had looked at them. And there are so many things along those lines that were just, lucky chances for me. But also, I am built and stand on your shoulders. You and Sonia went partially through the desegregation program, which took you to schools maybe that you wouldn't have chosen or wanted to go to. Mama found Classical Junior Academy when I was in second or first grade and got me over there and got Sonia over there as soon as she could. And so these were chances on a timeline. Ron Himes and the St. Louis Black Repertory Company, a summer camp that turned into a summer job, and mentorship. These were chances that we feel like we can't leave to chance any longer, and that you and I work together with folks like Cheryl to make sure that communities are aware of these deficits, so that we can work to fill those holes.
I agree.
Cheryl and Andre, I'm impressed with your relationship. When I first met Cheryl by email and then got on the phone and I think a Zoom call, I could see this is a person that helps unlock modes of thought for you, Andre. And I would suggest, Andre, that you're also unlocking some modes of thought for Cheryl, and that you all are locked together on this part of your journey. So I want to ask you all to talk a little bit about your reentry narrative, and I'll mostly listen with a couple questions.
Thank you both. I would say that I probably have benefited more than Andre has. And boy, he's had a lot of mentors. Many of them are on this call. Everybody's so proud to have been touched by him. So I also want to comment because, this is AAMP. And in your story, I hear threads of that African concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are. And it sounds to me that whether you have been physically together or physically apart, your identities have been shaped fundamentally by this connection that you have as brothers. And, even more broadly, I'd say I have benefited from that extended connection. That sense of Blackness that binds us together. And so, that's one insight I'd bring. I did want to ask you, Andre, since reentry is in the title of the program, to talk a little bit about your reentry journey, your journey from incarceration back into the community, which has really been so important, a part of your story, at least of late. I want to acknowledge that while you've been navigating being a full-time parent, being a full-time student, you've also been helping to lead in Western Washington a reentry movement to help remove barriers to reentry for so many other people. Working closely with Tara Simmons, who was recently became the first person with a felony background to be elected to the Washington State Legislature with, by the way, bipartisan support. So I'd like you, Andre, to share what reentry is, why it's so personal to you, and also why you think it's enjoying such widespread and even bipartisan support right now in our country.
Reentry describes the process of reintegrating into society after incarceration. I think many people support it as an extension of the idea that the criminal justice system should be about rehabilitation. And there is no rehabilitation without a pathway back into voting rights, employment, housing, etc. Also, some people support it from an economic perspective. While the prison industrial complex is very profitable for some, data shows that the costs of society are much greater. Brian Stevenson talks about in his book, he notes his book, Just Mercy, he notes that spending on jails and prisons by state and federal governments has risen from 6.9 billion in 1980 to almost $80 billion today. Private prison builders and prison service companies have spent millions of dollars to persuade state and local governments to create new crimes, impose harsher sentences, and keep more people locked up so they can earn more profit. This private profit has corrupted incentives to improve public safety, reduce the costs of mass incarceration, and promote rehabilitation for the incarcerated. It has also undermined the stability of families and communities whose members have been locked away without a viable pathway to return. And it's deprived the economy and society of all of their talents and driven up costs for social service supports to address the holes they leave in their families and communities. So reentry helps formerly incarcerated individuals reenter society and develop networks of resources and support that make it less likely that they will reoffend. Also, I should add that a high percentage of incarcerated and justice-involved people suffer from mental health challenges and addiction. Jails and prisons are not the best way to treat either. So those who support public safety, fiscal responsibility, economic development, family values, and rehabilitation all have a stake in finding an alternative to the current system. I'm personally called to this work because I have experienced the barriers to reentry firsthand. I've faced barriers to housing, employment, voting rights, and legal navigation, as well as being stigmatized as a felon. In fact, Cheryl and I met when I was denied on-campus employment because of my criminal background. She organized an employee development workshop where I was asked to serve on a panel of formerly incarcerated students. Since then, I've continued to advocate for reentry as an equity issue, both on and off campus. I know a lot of students and other people in the community who experience stigmatization and structural barriers despite their best efforts. Though the disproportionate criminalization of Black and brown communities means that we are overrepresented in those numbers, there are still a lot of white folks, mostly poor, who also have these experiences. Therefore, the reentry movement is ripe for organizing across race, culture, gender, and other identity markers for positive change. And we're trying to do that where I live in Washington State, and we've had some success. I've worked with and am a member of Civil Survival, which is a social justice group that organizes people in the state of Washington who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system to build connections, gain knowledge, and increase political participation. Civil Survival has contributed to significant legislative changes throughout Washington, including laws such as fair chances in education, banning the box for public college applications, fair chances in employment, banning the box on employment applications, and legal financial obligation reform, reducing crippling interest and fines imposed by the state on the justice involved. So while the reentry movement, like the movement for racial integration, may be focused on reforming the system, those who are leading it and are seeing the fruits of our labor are gaining our sense of collective power and agency to lead an even more sweeping change.
You do a lot in this arena. Can you speak just a little bit more about how you infuse your reentry organizing with the principles of multiracial movement building, especially at a time with such rampant anti-Black racism?
And let me just jump in and say, this to me is one of the most admirable things. As I've listened to Andre speak, as I've listened to you speak, it's never I and me. And though you are understanding how Blackness contributes to folks' perception of you and perhaps to the shaping of things around you, you talk about others, healing others. And it's not just about those who are formerly incarcerated, especially those dealing with mental health issues and addiction issues. For you, it's all one thing. I mean, they roll out in the same sentence. So yeah, please just talk a little bit about arriving there.
That's a great prompt and setup, really, because I love talking about we, because it's all about we. You know, when you're dealing with a person's dealing with things like drug addiction, uh, mental illness, and other um, you know, negative things that's caused by societal conditions, a lot of it is isolating. You feel isolated. You dwell in isolation. It's self-centered, and it's all about me. And so it's ironic that, you know, the pathway out of that and the healing to all of that is all about we. Um, you know, um, I just am really appreciative for the fact that I get a chance to attempt to use my negative experiences, not only to turn my own life around and to help myself, but to help those around me. Every barrier that I've faced, um, every every wall that I've come up against, um, I couldn't get past alone. I needed others, and I learned to reach out to others. I learned to open up. I learned to share my experiences, negative and positive, to share my barriers um, with others, and I've learned that without community partnerships, without building community, without um, building spaces where we share our identities, that I would not have come out of any of this. So everything that I do, um, I'll just say again, I'm just very appreciative to be able to do for people that may come behind me and come up against the same barriers.
We need leaders like you who can see themselves in others and help others to do the same, because we're going to have to really build coalitions to do anything transformational. So I thank you for that work. Ivan, I'd like to just turn to you a moment. You've mentioned that the museum is currently hosting the Rendering Justice exhibition.
Yes.
That showcasing art that's part of Mural Arts Philadelphia's Reimagining Reentry program. Can you discuss your work around mass incarceration and how Andre is actually helping to inform your work?
Our museum's work around the Black experience is a constant. And so, you know, last year, a lot of folks landed on the idea that we've been here for 400 years. The range of issues and problems and different obstacles that have been faced by Africans and Black people in this country during that time isn't that broad. And in fact, you know, in a city that celebrates the life and legacy of Octavius Valentine Cato with the erection of a statue near City Hall, also needs to know that his murder led to the first calls for Black police officers on Black streets, in Black neighborhoods, and just, you know, a new shifting of our relationship with law enforcement and with criminal justice. And so anytime there's a strong, important lesson like that occurred in Philly and that's part of our neighborhood, I want to explore it. But beyond that, we are looking at, you know, on an occasional basis through our programs, through some of our exhibitions, on an annual or semi-annual basis, coming back to this circle or this chain of criminal justice in this country. And so today it may be around mass incarceration, and tomorrow it may be around fair policing in our communities. But in general, it is one of those repeat issues that has come up in our communities. And so what we're trying to do is expand the dialogue. One thing we are is a learning institution, and I'm a learning person. So I've learned about prison gerrymandering in the past couple years as we're thinking about rendering justice. I've learned about redemptive justice as a term and restorative justice through my reading. You mentioned Brian Stevenson. I've had interactions with Zach Norris, one of my Harvard classmates, who talks about crimes, shifting our language from talking about crimes and criminals to shifting our language to talking about harms and those who have done harm. And that those things shift the way we think about the people to whom we're referring. And so we're in the business of promoting and giving a platform for people who can teach us those things, as well as, in this case, having a gallery space in the walls for a curatorial vision to align with the discourse. Now, I have to say, our museum, not everyone here is in Philadelphia, is from Philadelphia. Our museum is directly across the street from a federal detention center. And, you know, it's been regarded with dismay by artists, visitors, members, and staff alike since it was erected and since we've become aware of it. Having an exhibition like Rendering Justice, which fills the front windows and the front facade of our building. It fills the galleries on the third and fourth floors, but there's also a mural on the exterior of the building, which places us in direct conversation with that corridor, with all of the traffic, all of the eyes, and all of the minds who are involved with that prison next door. I will say this. I knew there was a prison there when I started working at this museum over 14 years ago. I found out right away. A couple of days after working there, I would hear the people who are incarcerated there occasionally playing handball. You could hear their voices and the echoes. But in the past year, and I've told this story recently because it happened recently, past couple of years, I came to the museum in the middle of the night after our gala. And I saw folks who were pulled over on the street near our museum, flashing their lights and honking their horns. And I realized these were folks visiting the people in the prison, and that their means of visitation was to flash your cell phone screen and honk your horn. And people were saying, "Hey, this is my outfit. Meet the baby, whatever." But I had never seen that, and I realized, you can lock us up, but we are still human. And we have to have those relationships. The other thing that I saw was coming to the museum at about 5 a.m. one morning to pick something up on a Saturday or Sunday, and seeing a line of visitors to that federal detention center, folks who are lined up to visit their loved ones. And that line stretched way more than a block down the street. And I've been working here for almost 14 years at this point, and I'd never seen that. I'd never been there at that time of day to see that. But all of these things are occurring. I'm witnessing these things as we're putting the finishing touches on planning for Rendering Justice. And so I know that exhibitions like this, public dialogue like this, is advancing our mission and hopefully allowing us to produce tools for the community to use to heal themselves. And so, it's an ongoing journey for us. And I could say, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to do this like this, but this won't be, this is far from the last time you'll hear AAMP talk about criminal justice.
You've both mentioned Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy. The subtitle of the book is A Story of Justice and Redemption. And I know both of you resonated with the idea of referencing redemptive justice as part of the title and the content of the program. Now, as I understand it, redemptive justice speaks not so much to retribution for a crime, but more, as you noted, about healing. Healing not just the wrongdoer and the wronged, of which we, are all a part, but healing the society, the root causes of mass incarceration, of addiction, of widespread poverty, creating a state of sort of righteousness and relationship and health and love and freedom across the whole society, right? It sounds kind of prophetic, but as I've come to know, you both speak in those terms. So I'd like you all to talk about redemption and how your journeys as brothers, and especially in this context, what you've learned about redemptive justice, redemption, and the path to it.
Yes, you're right. You're speaking my language, a language of love and togetherness. That is what equips me, inspires me, and really sets me up to just get up the next day and try to do something, and something to help. And like I said before, not just to help myself. Um, I'm usually thinking about how I can help us. And when I think of redemptive justice, I think of kind of like, reentry as sort of restoring some societal structures. But when I think of redemptive justice, I think of just that. I think of healing from historical and generational traumas, uh, for marginalized communities, and for all people, for all of our society. Um, I remember not long ago, maybe about a month ago, I was involved in a leadership institute for formerly incarcerated individuals. And one of the guest speakers said something that I'll never forget. And he said that people don't change, they heal. And that really made a big impact on me. Even after I have been involved in reentry work for these last few years, it really made me take another look at how I saw myself, because I was thinking that I need to make all of these changes, and I was thinking that I need to transform myself, and I need to, but I wasn't thinking of in terms of necessarily just healing, because when I say I need to change, it makes me feel like something was wrong with me in the first place. And another reason why I really resonate with that is because I tell my mom about all of these accomplishments I'm making, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing great and I'm feeling great, mom, and I'm raising my family and I'm trying. And she tells me that she's known that person all along, uh, and that that's who I've always been. I remember having a conversation with Cheryl one time, and a revelation dawned on me. And I go, Cheryl, I come from a whole family of educators, and I just had never really saw myself in that light, or the idea that that's where I was supposed to be. So when I think about you know healing, um, then I can take myself out of that situation where there's something wrong with me that needs to be fixed. And I think that when we as society can, put things in place to that live up to this level of respect for human dignity and human life, and we can put social and institutional systems in place that nurture the growth of our most vulnerable populations. And if we can, uh, embrace the truth and be real about who those populations are, um, then we will realize true equity, transformation, and redemptive justice.
First of all, your words touch me, and I want to ask you to, what's the difference between redemptive justice and restorative justice? But even before I get there, or is there a difference? But before I get there, I just want to say, whatever it is and whatever it's called, what Andre's talking about to me requires a mutual embrace. That redemptive justice is a community practice. It is a group practice. There are, it is as beneficial to the people receiving the person back home as it is to the person coming home. And so Andre's redemption is inextricably linked to mine. I mean, we have, we got kids that look alike. What are we raising our kids to be, and what can they link up to do together? If we're doing our jobs well, they can do anything. And so Andre's redemption, in ways that are even more abstract than that, is linked to mine, and mine likewise to his. And so I see a paradox of you know, an engulfing embrace at the same time as the ability to allow oneself to be fully embraced and engulfed with love. I think it requires trust, forget what we know sometimes and forget our doubts, to allow redemption to occur. And I do think that we have to recognize it when it happens. It won't always look like, you know, maybe the thing that the way we would have drawn it out or imagined it, but that we have to stop and mark the moments. And sometimes we don't even know when an important moment has occurred until we talk to one another and are able to reflect on it. As we've discovered in this process, things that I didn't know were meaningful 10 years ago, I know were meaningful according to Andre's narrative, and what was going on with him at that time. And so I think about that for our whole picture of redemption and restoration. It's for him, it's for me, mine is for him, and it's ultimately for our families, our communities, and the world.
What I've experienced in healing, in gaining a sense of agency to transform institutions, I believe this is available to everyone. I believe that all people can heal their brokenness and use their pain for something good. And it all doesn't have to be, you know, just happened in vain. And I believe not only is this possible, but it's a calling. And it's one that's not just beneficial to me, it benefits us all. It benefits society as a whole. And if we ever want to, you know, realize our true potential, then we have to put those kind of, like I said, those kind of structures in place that will nurture and allow the healing of all of our, especially our most vulnerable citizens and our most vulnerable communities.
And I also want to add that this is a unique situation. I work where I work, and you are where you are. But this is part of our journey. This event tonight, and the fact that, you know, Andre is willing to pick up a megaphone and share something that he thinks can help somebody, and allow me to, you know, bring content to my museum community that perhaps they wouldn't have gotten in this way or from this angle, is an important part of a process that is ongoing. And so I thank you all for helping us, you know, get to this point. But I also, you know, anticipate seeing the next few phases in this process. Now we've got some good questions here, some really great ones. And I think it's some talk and shop type of stuff here. So I want to get to these questions, but I didn't know if there was another turn to do before we get there, Cheryl.
I just quickly wanted to respond as far as the distinctions between redemptive justice
Thank
and
you.
restorative justice. I'm no expert. I haven't studied it, but in my head, basically, because of what I've learned from Andre, I believe that restorative justice restores the relationship, again, between the wronged and the wrongdoers, the relationship between those returning from incarceration and the communities they've left. For me, redemptive justice touches the whole society. And speaking of, you know, those insights that we often never get a chance to acknowledge, I just told Andre today that it may not have seemed like a striking insight, but he changed my entire view of this discussion with a simple statement. And years ago, when he sat on that panel, I didn't know Andre. He said something that turned the conversation upside down. And he said, you know, people look at my background and they tell me, you know, you can't be in this role or have this job because you can't be around vulnerable populations. And he said, what I want you to understand is I am the vulnerable population that needs protecting. Well, that transformed my whole view of our role as educators, as cultural workers, as community members. It means we have got to revision our entire society. And so, yeah, he's prophetic. I'd also just like to add that at the Achieving the Dream conference, where he spoke before 2,000 people, people were just blown away. Facebook blew up. Everybody was talking about Andre, and he was very uncomfortable with that because he believes, as I do, that while he may be exceptional in many ways, we cannot afford for Andre to be the exception. We got to make it so that, you know, every Andre, your children, my children, and everybody else out there can shine and bring their talents to the rest of us. And so, you know, that again sounds to me a little redemptive.
We've got some really good questions in about 15 minutes, so I'll ask you all to be aware of the time, you know, with the responses. Andre, you were sharing memories and you mentioned that your brother had some people in his life that taught him how to be Black. That's not what he said. My question is, could both of you speak a little about that self-evolution in your journey and learning how to be Black in the nation of such deep-rooted systemic racism? I was at a time and a confluence of events and beneficiary of my mother's effort, working 2 jobs, going to school, that alone, working 2 jobs, going to night school. Need I say more? I witnessed that. But I did have those pop culture affirmations. I did have the musical affirmations. So the parts of my life where I wasn't on stage and I wasn't required, I was still being reinforced. My buddy, DJ Tart, who, you know, that's the one I credit with so much. I mean, that's the person who didn't just play Public Enemy. We all listened to it, but that's the one who was taking me to hear, you know, Farrakhan speak, and taking me to explore Black modes of thought. I can say that I absorbed so many different points of view at that time that I was able to pick and choose those which strengthened my view of Blackness. I didn't convert to Islam. I didn't become a Muslim. I did find Anthony Browder from the Browder Files in the basement of my mother's house after she had gone to a 5-cent book sale and brought home all these boxes of books. And so there were some seeds planted and maybe some clues left for me to discover. There was a lot of chance involved, I would say. But I also had, you know, part of that chance was leading me to strong mentors. I mentioned the St. Louis Black Repertory Company that went from a summer camp to an internship and something different to do with my time, and find some mentorship. At Classical Junior Academy, I could name all the teachers, but I will name Lucy Gay Guerin, Miss Hoppy, and the late Mr. Collins, my music teacher. These were people that took an active interest in me, but also, you know, witnessed and supported, you know, the affirmation of self-love in me. They saw it blossoming, and they wanted to help it grow and to nurture it. And so that was like special set of circumstances that really set me up. And I've always felt like I got into a good groove and a lot of great things. Opportunities were placed before me, but I did always think it shouldn't be this kind of, it shouldn't have to be luck. And why me? Why do I get these privileges?
I didn't mean that, you know, that you can minimize, that I would minimize the Black experience to like a singular experience, or that, you know, that I can represent the whole Black race. But there are definitely some threads of commonality and shared experiences that we have together. And a lot of those are in struggle, resilience, and hope. And I too, I look to my mom. who sacrificed. That's what I saw in my mom, is loving sacrifice. And I looked to my family and my uncles and my cousins, and and the way we were together, that we had each other's back no matter what. But I didn't experience a critical analysis or the truth of Black history in America. I was one of those. I was duped by the history books. I read what they gave me, which wasn't much, and it really wasn't much in the way of me seeing myself. And so, but for whatever reasons, I wasn't exposed to those type of things or those relationships early on in life. It was meant for me to go a different path and come back around, and receive that enlightenment later on. I can appreciate now the truth as it relates to me, now that I'm awake to ask questions, and then question the answers, and to really find my own agency to dig deep and find out what that truth is. I could appreciate that a lot more than I could at an earlier age, when those truths were hidden from me.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. I mean, we were talking last year or at some point, and you were saying it's like I'm waking up, like I'm at this point I'm seeing things with new eyes. And I thought, that's actually, I thought, a blessed place to be, if you'll use that vision. It's a great place to be.
It reminds me of one of your lyrics, where one of the things that used to carry me through, and you said, when I'm asleep, I get a peep at the dream. When I'm awake, it's like a beacon. I just follow the beam. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about, man, I've been following that beam ever since, bro.
That's it. Oh man, you're not gonna start me rapping now. So
no, we're not gonna take it there.
Andre, I'm struck with the realization that while increasing access to degree programs for the formerly incarcerated community is vital, that there's another realm of interior change that is equally, if not more important, that all the resources and opportunities we can muster don't help if the person is not healing from within. How can we as students show up for each other to do this work together? And can you think of ways we could leverage the institutions we attend to support us in this endeavor?
Students kind of coming together, forming shared identities, understanding, why we need each other. Even from different walks of life, different races, different backgrounds, why we need each other. And I would say that I would advocate at our institutions, the need for students to be at the center of discussions that affect students. Just about every decision that affects students, there should be some student input from the beginning of the process, in the middle of the process, to the end of the process. And to the part where about increasing access to degree programs, that is important. But I think that the way that we go about healing is how we approach that. In changing the curriculums to be more inclusive of all walks of life, and people from all different types of diversities, so that at my institution I could see myself reflected in being in what is being taught. Just like I said, when I was a kid, I read the books that was put in front of me, and I didn't see myself in them. I didn't see myself reflected, and therefore, I had no location. I had no location in that society. So, when we go back to our different institutions, we can always be a voice for and be sensitive to people who may be left out of the conversation, have an awareness of marginalized communities within the student population, and advocate for those types of institutional changes that would be more inclusive and socially and culturally redeeming for us all.
Someone asked, the Navy sells itself as a place to go if you want to secure your future, but it sounds like the Navy may not have been a great place to find mentors for you.
You know, that experience does promote certain supports and you know, things that need to be in place. Basically, what I saw from the military is that, you know, they were going to take me from my mama's house and they were going to set me up for success and they were going to make me a man, you know. But when I got there, again, you know, without the presence of you know, cultural role models or some type of role model or you know, some way for me to feel connected. The Navy was a, you know, was a long, long way from where I come from. You know, there ain't no ships in my neighborhood. There ain't no of these type of systems that I just um, wasn't able to transition through.
Mm-hmm.
And even in those instances, we can go about institutional changes that will be more inclusive for marginalized communities. You know, that would be more um, you know, aware of social biases and things like that. Because basically, I went to the Navy and you know, I felt disconnected. I was even, you know, since then I've been kind of diagnosed. I've been diagnosed with uh, uh, complex PTSD, childhood PTSD, exacerbated by the Navy. So you know, it takes somebody like me from my background, from my experience, and like I said, I couldn't relate to what was going on, to how things were being handled. I didn't see any role models that I identified with, and so I you know, that led directly into my whole cycle of drug addiction and incarceration. So the Navy, I believe, kind of failed me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be that way for everybody, but I think it happens for many young men and women coming from my situation.
Mm-hmm. Dre, I didn't want to do it, but um, I just want to say that, you know, one of the things that you left me that I talked about was hip hop, and you know, it really, my mastery of language gave me confidence. In a nutshell, it makes me an English major in college. It makes me work at a publishing company. It makes me continue to try to write and speak effectively for impact. But it started in fourth grade with Miss Davis, where I was, you know, doing well at a magnet school, but also messing around a bit. And you know, you wanted me to get my game together, stop messing around so much. And so you worked with me on hip hop and my vocabulary list, the hit parade, to write those words into raps. And this was, you know, high school level vocabulary words that fourth graders were learning at Classical Junior Academy. So, you know, I can never pay you back for that because it made mastering your work cool, and that was all I needed. Was to be cool. And if I could do good things while I was at it, then I would. And so, you know, that's a long time ago, man. 34, 35 years ago. But it resonates with me to this day. And I'm still grateful. And I'm also grateful that I've written things musically that have kept us connected. And that I've worked hard enough to have a job where I could have a platform so we could work together. That's the greatest blessing, and that's how we know these things are meant to be. So thank you so much, you know, for being here with us today. And Cheryl, you know, my Harvard English sister, I don't want to say the Andre Whisperer because I know there's whisperers everywhere, but I will say, you know, you are his partner in this era of his evolution, and I hope and I know he's a great partner for you in this era of yours. I can see it, and I can't wait to work with y'all some more.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. And Sonia said, keep shining. I think she's joking. I think she's
talking about that. She's talking about your
I
head.
think she's talking about. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Brotherly Love, conversation on race, reentry, and redemptive justice. Please support our museum. Please visit us at www.aampmuseum.org. Good night.